We're breaking down more early round defensive end options for the Buffalo Bills in the 2025 NFL Draft today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Well, folks, welcome in. More NFL draft prospects to break down for the Buffalo Bills today. On this episode, we've done 2 episodes on corners, 2 on defensive tackles. Yesterday, we started our defensive end conversation. We have 7 more defensive ends to cover today, and we got 7 more tomorrow. So you wanted draft talk, you're getting it here on this podcast as we get ready for the event from the lens of the Buffalo Bills, and obviously focusing in on options at needs that I believe are primary for this team. And of course, that's corner and D tackle and DN. We're going to get into wide receivers next, so plenty of discussion left to come. Again, like I said, we started this conversation yesterday. We covered 6 defensive ends yesterday, 7 more today, 7 more tomorrow. The players on today's episode: Landon Jackson out of Arkansas, James Pearce from Tennessee, Braden Swinson out of LSU, Princely Umanmielen out of Ole Miss, Olu Oladejo out of UCLA, Josiah Stewart from Michigan, and Sorrell from Texas. Those players today. And we got some heavy hitters to get to tomorrow. Shamar Stewart. We got Micah Williams. We got Abdul Carter. Big names to cover tomorrow as well. I'd like to leave a few big names for every single episode. That way we get a couple of the first-round guys, couple of second-round guys, couple of third-round guys to really talk about, you know, each range of where the Bills could be selecting a player at the respective position. So let's do it. Let's start talking about these defensive ends. We'll begin with Landon Jackson out of Arkansas. He's 6'6", 264 pounds, 33.25-inch arms, 10-inch hands. RAS score of a 9.78 out of 10. Excellent RAS score. For his career, 1,594 snaps played, 28 tackles for loss, 16 sacks, had a pass rush win rate in 2024 of 11.2%. 22 years old. He'll turn 23 in January 2026. He was a big-time recruit coming out of Texas, the 4A Texas Defensive Player of the Year in high school. So big-time recruit. He took his talents to Arkansas. So like we do with every prospect, we're going to answer 2 questions. Why should the Bills consider drafting this player? And what concerns are there about forecasting this player to the Buffalo Bills? So why should the Bills consider drafting Landon Jackson out of Arkansas? Well, I think it's a really clean fit. He reminds me a lot of Montez Sweat and the type of edge rushers the Bills have typically went after under Sean McDermott and even Sean McDermott's career back in Carolina. He's got really good length. He's got great hand power, a lot of hand moves, that ability to really shave angles. He's got good finishing burst. I love the contact balance. I love how he can play through the edges of blocks. You know, he's heavy hands, long arms, play through contact type guy. And I think he does a very good job of that type of style and winning appropriately. He's got very sudden and violent hands, which enables him to control reps early on. And, you know, he's got a lot of strength to power through angles. I think he's got good overall rush variety. Excellent inside a rip move. Plenty of different counters and combinations in his repertoire to be able to beat blocks. And I think he's a very self-aware player. What I can appreciate about Landon Jackson is he knows how he wins, and he does that. You know, he's not a player that is going to win with burst and flexibility around the edge, and he doesn't try to do that. He knows the style of player he is, And you could tell he's honed in on the techniques required to maximize the skill set that he does have. And I think he's an outstanding run defender. So you're going to get a really complete player here in Landon Jackson. What concerns are there about forecasting him to the Bills? Well, he's got tight hips. He's not bendy or flexible. You're not going to watch him and feel like you're watching Joshua Hines-Allen from the Jaguars or that type of guy. He's a guy that's going to win with the power and the length and being able to shave angles as opposed to just run around people. He's got modest change of direction ability, the cornering skills in terms of being able to flatten and really turn. That's not going to be his strength. He's a bit high cut. He's 6'6". So there's an emphasis that he always has to have on playing with good leverage to keep those pads low and not allow him to get tall, right? That's something he kind of naturally has to fight. But I think it's a really clean projection to the Bills. I didn't know how much I'd like him. I've watched a little bit of him prior to doing the deep dive before recording this podcast, and I didn't know if he was going to be my favorite prospect, but I really enjoyed what I watched. And would I love him at 30? Not so much, but I think it's a player I could certainly live with at pick 30. I think he's ideally you trade back a little bit and get him, but I think he's a really clean projection and a good football player that knows who he is and has honed in on the best ways to win for the skill set that he has. I like Landon Jackson a good bit. Let's get to James Pearce out of Tennessee. 6'5", 245 pounds, 32 3/4 on the arm length, 10-inch hands. Relative athleticism score of a 9.4. Production-wise, 987 snaps at Tennessee, 30 tackles for loss, 19.5 sacks. Very good pass rush win rate here, 23% in 2024. 21 years old. He's going to turn 22 in October. So why should the Bills consider drafting James Pearce? Well, really, really, really explosive guy. Dynamic burst, dynamic first step, and that's the name of the game for him. He wins with speed. And I think he's very efficient with his footwork, which maximizes his explosiveness. You'll see him work different tempos. You'll see him vary his stride lengths, and that enables him to really maximize that speed and keep those offensive tackles guessing in terms of when they need to open their hips to be able to frame him on the perimeter. I think he makes it pretty challenging. And I think for a guy that doesn't have a ton of length, decent length, 32 3/4 arms, I think he plays with pretty good extension to keep blockers out of his frame. So that's what I really like about James Pearce. Now, what concerns are there about forecasting him to the Bills? Well, he's a very unique player where there's a lot of burst and explosiveness, but he really lacks bend and flexibility, which is pretty surprising for a guy that's kind of this profile, a little bit undersized, but super explosive. You kind of expect those guys to have a lot of flexibility, but he just really lacks it. He gets stuck at the apex of his rush and kind of struggles to really turn. And there's a lot of times where he's just hung on contact and gets worked right past the peak of the pocket. And that's not great because you complement burst with bend and he's missing the bend. And of course, there's not really a power element to how he plays. He's a guy that you think would be a run around you guy, but he doesn't really have that ability to turn. And then he's missing like power components to really play through that contact. It's just a really unique blend of traits here that has me concerned about him, to be honest with you. I don't think he's a very sturdy run defender at all. And I think generally he's an incomplete profile. Like I said, he's bursty, but lacks bend and also lacks mass and functional strength to reduce angles. And I think he's a bit of a scheme-specific player that you would want to use him in ways that you can maximize that linear explosiveness type of scheme that's going to create rush lanes. It's going to be willing to take advantage of the linear nature of his athleticism. And I have a lot of questions if the Bills are the type of team that would really tailor what they do to maximize this skill set. So I don't find him to be a very clean fit for the Bills. And so kind of a player that I'm not super in on for Buffalo. So I know that he's got some fans. I wouldn't call me one of them. All right, coming up on the other side of it, 3 really interesting prospects to get into, including this Olu Oladejo out of UCLA that is just super interesting. We'll break him down and more on the other side of it. Folks, be sure to stick with me. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd, and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person, and getting tickets should not be stressful. That's where Game Time comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Game Time Picks is the easiest way to find and buy tickets to live events. The curation makes it easier to find better value for tickets to sports, concert, music, theater events, comedy events, all the different events that you would attend live. You get peace of mind with seat views before you buy, no surprise fees at checkout, and the lowest price guarantee. You can book with total confidence. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, next up, I want to talk about Princely Umanmielen. Yeah, you didn't think I was going to get the pronunciation right on that. Well, I studied it and I practiced it, and we'll call him Princely from this point forward. But that last name one more time, Umanmielen, out of Ole Miss. 6'4", 244 pounds, 33 7/8 on the arm length, 9 5/8 on the hand size, 8.98 RAS score. It's pretty good out of 10. Production-wise, 1,850 snaps, 40 tackles for loss, 25.5 sacks for his career. 14 of those tackles for loss and 10.5 of those sacks came in 2024. Had a pass rush win rate of 22.8% in 2024. He's 22 years old. He's going to turn 23 in April. He spent his first 4 seasons at Florida. Then he went to Ole Miss in 2024. In high school, he played football and competed in track, where he threw the shot put and the discus. So why should the Bills consider drafting Princely Umanmielen? Well, you got to love the first step here. He's got a really rapid, sudden first step that quickly eats up ground, and it sets up his rush. And he blends that with good flexibility, can really reduce that upper half, be very slippery around the edges, and he's got good length. It's a nice combination. We have burst, bend, and length. That's nice to have as a pass rusher, and he plays with terrific effort. So there's a big-time motor that comes with this player, and he's got really good closing burst as well. When he's got those creases, when he's got angles, he's got very good finishing ability to be able to close that distance and hunt the football. So I think he's a pretty straightforward guy in terms of how he wins as a pass rusher. First step, length, flexibility, effort, and that closing speed. What concerns are there about forecasting Princely Umanmielen out of Ole Miss to the Bills? Well, I think the power elements are really missing here. He's more of a finesse player. And like we've said, the Bills have shown an appetite for this. They signed Leonard Floyd. They've signed Von Miller. They drafted Javon Solomon. So they've told us that it's okay to not have power elements, but they are missing here. And this is a guy that's going to win with those finesse type tendencies. And he needs that blend of first step quickness, length, and flexibility, because if hands get on this guy, it's going to be hard for him to be able to really be a meaningful player on that snap. And I think on top of that, he just doesn't have a ton of counters and combinations in terms of like pass rush variety with his hands. You know, he wins in a very specific way. So I don't think he's a super complete player. You know, he'd be an interesting fit for the Bills. He's a likable guy, not just like as a person. I don't know him at all. He's a likable guy in terms of the player you watch on tape. The projection to the Bills defense, I think, comes with some questions, but a good football player. Let's talk about this Olu Oladejo out of UCLA. This guy's really interesting. 6'3", 259 pounds, 33 3/8 on the arm length, 9 3/4 on the hand size. Don't have a relative athleticism score from him. He hasn't tested yet. Production-wise, 1,937 snaps, 25 tackles for loss, and 6 sacks. He's 21. He turns 22 in September. He had 2 seasons at Cal, then his last 2 seasons at UCLA. So here's the deal here. He played off-ball linebacker his entire college career, including the first 2 games of 2024. Then he switched to edge rusher. And my goodness, did he show some really exciting stuff. So when I say he's only had, 6 sacks and over 1,900 snaps, realize that only the last 10 or 11 games of his career he played on the edge. And we're talking about him as a potential day 2 prospect right now because of what he showcased in that stretch of games. So why should the Bills consider drafting Olu Oladejo? Upside. Very, very impressive what he put on tape on the edge, especially after really having no time there previously and making the switch during the season. Like, very impressive. He's quick, lightning quick. He's got good length, and he's super flexible. So you love that. But he's also got power elements. Very powerful at the point of attack. Has a bit of a dense build. Kind of some good thickness, some width to his frame. But not super angular, not super like long-limbed and tall. There's a density to his frame that I think helps him a ton to be able to complement quickness, length, and flexibility with some power to be able to stress and play, through blocks a little bit too, not just relying on that ability to get around blocks. And his motor's off the charts. He might have the best motor in the class of any defensive player. He'll have an argument for that. He plays with his hair on fire, and you love it. So what concerns are there about forecasting Olu Oladejo out of UCLA to the Bills? Well, he's a work in progress, obviously. I mean, he's only played maybe 10 games in his life as an edge rusher or a defensive end type player. And so, all the nuance and time on task that really unlocks your ability, it's missing, right? He hasn't done it. And so, of course, it's not just the technical piece. There's a processing piece to it, right? You're playing on the edge. It's a different ball game than as a stack linebacker, right? It's just a different football game. And so all of that stuff has to become second nature. You don't have time to be thinking about what you're supposed to do. You're playing in the National Football League. You got to be able to go. And so that's going to be part of his story. Like, there's going to be a curve there. But I'll be honest, I think that's kind of attractive for the Bills, where you're not necessarily looking at the edge rusher situation and feeling like, my goodness, you got to have it right now. The need at edge is like, okay, you've got Bosa and Epinesa as expiring contracts. Who can help you in 2026 and have some value to the contract? And that's why we're talking about defensive ends. And so, get this guy playing special teams, kind of in the Javon Solomon role this past year, and give him a year to season up his game. And, maybe you let him situationally rush and then, see what he can do for you in 2026. So I think the Bills are actually kind of the right type of environment to invest in a player like him. So there's that. And you're just going to have to develop him, right? That's the other thing, is there's good flashes, but there's a curve here. And, if you have a ecosystem like the Bills where there's stability, I think you got a good chance to unlock what he's shown on tape. And I'm pretty intrigued. I'm not going to lie to you. Let's talk about Braden Swinson out of LSU. 6'4", 255 pounds, 33 3/8 on the arm length, 9 7/8 on the hand size. Don't have an RAS score for him. He hasn't tested yet. Production-wise, 1,558 snaps, 26 tackles for loss, 13.5 sacks. 8.5 of those sacks came in 2024. Had a 22.1% pass rush win rate in 2024. He's 22 years old. Spent his first 3 seasons at Oregon, then the last 2 at LSU. So why should the Bills be thinking about drafting Braden Swinson out of LSU? I really like his pass rush profile. There's a lot to like here. I had to watch a lot of tape on this guy. This felt like a guy that I just had to keep watching to get the right feel for the player. But I kind of think I came around. And he's got a good pass rush profile, very good athlete. Liked his variety, plenty of different ways that he can beat blocks, deep repertoire of moves, if you will. I like how he works his length. I like how he works his hands. He's got over 33-inch arms, and I think he's got pretty good pop in his hands to be able to maximize that length and play with some extension. I think he's got good flexibility as well. Like, there's a lot here that you like, and I think he's pretty savvy with how he uses his hands and uses his length to soften those angles, and I think he's got good footwork as well. There's just a really nice blend of skill and traits that translate well to rushing the passer in the NFL. What concerns are there about forecasting Braden Swinson out of LSU to the Bills? I think he's got a bit of a narrow build, and I think that affects his contact balance. He's 6'4", but he's just kind of narrow. And, I think that changes your center of gravity. You don't have much density to your frame. And I think that creates some challenges for him, and it affects his contact balance. I didn't love his run defense in terms of profiling him against offensive tackles. I don't love the idea of asking him to set the edge and squeeze gaps against offensive tackle. He's fine over tight ends, but over offensive tackles, I think he leaves something to be desired. I talked about the contact balance being ordinary, and so that ability to power through an edge, you got a greased rush angle. Can you get through it? I think he's missing some of the power and balance necessary to do that. I think he's also a guy that does his best work from wider alignments. So you think about that Jim Schwartz wide 9, or think about a 3-4 rush linebacker. I think that's probably better. It's a better role for him at the next level. I don't think he's a clean scheme fit, but again, because of the Bills' personnel choices over the last few years, I've certainly opened my mind to players like this and felt he was worth having a discussion about. All right, we got 2 more players to get to. Josiah Stewart out of Michigan, Braden Sorrell out of Texas. We'll break them down for you here on the other side of it. Folks, be sure to stick with me. All right, let's talk about some more football players here. Braden Sorrell out of Texas. 6'3", 256 pounds, 32 1/4 on the arm length, 9 1/4 on the hand size. I'm not going to lie to you. I thought he was going to be bigger. Just watching his tape, he just looks bigger. Maybe it's because he wears 88, and so he just naturally looks bigger, but I thought he'd be bigger than that. That's not bad size. That size is fine, but he just looks bigger. His relative athleticism score was a 9.3 out of 10. Very good there. 1,962 snaps in college, 26 tackles for loss, 15.5 sacks, pass rush win rate in 2024 of 13.4%. 22 years old. He's going to turn 23 in December. So why should the Bills consider drafting Braden Sorrell? I think he's got a very balanced skill set. Solid pass rusher, solid run defender. I don't think he's deficient in either area. Maybe he's not exceptional in either area, but he's very balanced with how he can contribute to the football team. I like his play temperament. There's a demeanor about the way he plays the game that is easy to like. He's aggressive into contact. He's a very competitive dude, which you can kind of feel that through the way he plays. Very good technical player. I think you talk about hand technique, footwork, reading plays, responding appropriately. I think he's a good processor. I don't think he's not going to do anything that's going to make you lose, right? He's just very solid across the board, like not just as a run defender or as a pass rusher, but technical refinement, how he sees the game. It's very clean. I think he's got solid hand technique, decent flexibility. He's a good athlete. He just checks a lot of boxes. Like there's a high floor, I think, with Braden Sorrell. And he's a heck of an athlete, 9.3 relative athleticism score. He's not limited by any athletic restrictions. What concerns are there about forecasting Braden Sorrell out of Texas to the Bills? You wish he had a little bit more length. I think that affects some of his opportunities to win with technique. You can just get out reach, and it's not going to matter that you got a great, club swim combo. If guys are able to get into your pads, it's going to be a challenge, and you can't play things close to the vest. And so I think you wish he had a little bit more length. You wish he had a little bit more mass to help with the power components. He's not small, but 256 pounds. Is he going to be able to really consistently anchor? Is he going to be able to consistently, play through contact and get to the edges and power through? I think it's fair to question some of that. And then I think even though he's a good athlete, I wish that first step was just a tick more dynamic. So I feel like maybe his best football is ahead of him, and he's a high floor guy. I think he'd be a very safe selection on day 2, where I don't know that you're going to get an elite player, but I think you're going to get a very, very much a sufficient level starter. Last player today is Josiah Stewart out of Michigan. 6'1", 249, 31 7/8 on the arm length, 9.5-inch hand. So a little short, lacking some mass, and definitely lacking length. Don't have the relative athleticism score on him, although I suppose it would be very good. He's a good athlete. Production-wise, 1,835 snaps, 48 tackles for loss, 30 sacks. Pass rush win rate in 2024 of 27.7%. That is nuts. That is a crazy high pass rush win rate. He's 21. He's going to turn 22 in April. Spent his first 2 years of college at Coastal Carolina, then his last 2 at Michigan. So why should the Bills consider drafting Josiah Stewart? He's urgent, explosive, flexible. He's got built-in leverage, dense and compact build. Really like the contact balance. He reminds me a ton of Shaquille Barrett. Remember this guy? Played for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for a long time. Like body type wise, very similar. Not a ton of length, but there's a density to his frame. There's burst. There's flexibility, and he just wins. And it's just watch him play. It's all I'll say. Just watch him play. He's going to win a lot of reps because of that blend of traits. I think he's got good pass rush variety, plenty of hand counters, very slippery, working around the edges of blocks. And he does a very good job of just not offering much surface area, right? Like at the end of the day, so much of trench play in the NFL is getting hands on guys and then allowing your ability to control the block with your hands. And if you don't offer surface area to the blocker, it's hard for them to get your hands on you, which makes it difficult for them to block you. And I think Josiah Stewart just has a very savvy way that he plays the game, in addition to being a little bit dense, a little bit lean, that makes it hard for guys to get their hands on him. And so that leads to him winning a lot of reps and making a lot of plays. So what concerns are there about forecasting him to the Bills? I wouldn't call him a clean schematical fit. I think he's much better suited to be a 3-4 rush linebacker. And I think he's fine playing the run against tight ends, but again, playing over offensive tackles and, fighting pressure with pressure and squeezing gaps and, not getting rooted out is going to be a challenge for him. So again, not a super clean scheme fit, but a very likable football player. I think you'd have a hard time watching his film and not thinking, man, that guy can really play, right? He's a good football player. Is he a good scheme fit for the Bills? Maybe not, but a guy that, again, I keep talking about these types of players because the Bills have told me it's okay to. They've invested in these types of players. So we got to open up our mind. We can't just talk about Landon Jackson, right? Because they are open to some other ideas. Although Landon Jackson of today's conversation is definitely the cleanest projection to the Buffalo Bills. All right, we'll talk about more prospects tomorrow. We got a long list of guys tomorrow, some heavy hitters. I'll tease it for you. We got Josaiah Stewart out of Texas A&M. We got Michael Williams out of Georgia. Those are both projected first-round picks. Abdul Carter, I want to talk about him out of Penn State. Jalen Walker out of Georgia. Those are probably top 10 picks, but like I've done for other position groups, I talked about Travis Hunter. I talked about Mason Graham. These guys are not in the range for the Bills to pick, but I think there's value in me talking about these players so you can hear the way that I discuss them and contrast them to the players that are more realistic for the Bills and kind of get an idea of what those differences are. And so I want to share those thoughts with you, even though those are not necessarily clean projections to the Bills. We'll talk about Ashton Gillott. I'll figure out how to say his name. Sorry, I didn't get it right that time. Jordan Birch, and then I'm not even going to try this one, but JT out of Ohio State. So loaded episode tomorrow, breaking down the rest of these edge rushers. So looking forward to that. Hope you're enjoying these draft conversations. Plenty more to come. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills! And I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.